Hi, I'm Eliza David. Hope everybody is doing great and had a great week, a great Sukkot. Next week, we're going to be starting the book of Genesis, Bereshit, wherein we read about the creation of the heaven and the earth, of course, by Hashem. And now we're 5,781 years later. And there's you, and there's me, and there's Facebook, and there's the world that we're living in today. Now, I was thinking, I'm very often harping on the fact that we need to be better Jews and better people without really offering the instruments and tools for doing so, other than saying, keep the Torah. And that usually is a very scary sentence to tell somebody. They say, oh, there's too many rules, too many regulations involved. I'm a good person, I keep the 10 Commandments. But the fact is that those very same people who say that they keep the 10 Commandments can't even list the 10 Commandments. And if they can list them, their insights into what's involved are deficient. So what I was thinking of doing was going through the 10 Commandments, hopefully at a rapid pace, although this first one might occupy most of the time, and then at a later date I'll follow up with the other 9 in a very much quicker way. But the first commandment is something that's strange to most people. And do you know what it is? Even before I get started, think about it. Give you a few seconds before the buzzer goes off. Okay, so the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So when people think about that sentence, they'll say, well, okay, but where's the commandment? I am the Lord your God. It's a sentence. It's a statement. Where's the commandment? But the fact is that this first commandment is a fundamental. It's the belief that God is the originator of all things, the creator of the heaven and the earth, who created from nothing, ex nihilo. He created the entire world. And believing that is the starting point from which any other commandment has meaning or relevance. Because if we don't believe that God is the creator of all things, and there is nothing but God, ein od milvado, then all the other commandments become relative to time and place and whim. For instance, killing today, no good. That's a common thought among all normal societies. You're not supposed to kill. But in ancient times, people were killing their kids and sacrificing them to gods. You see, laws are as good as the lawmaker. The 10 Commandments comes from God. So really, we should have no questions other than to question ourselves. Now, it's an interesting way to start the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. It's an interesting way because just get right to it. Tell us what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do. So why I? And in Hebrew, it becomes even more interesting because the word in Hebrew for ani, I. But that word ani depends on something else. It depends on you. In order for me to be me, you have to be you. But the Hebrew word that's used to start the sentence, I am the Lord your God, is the word anochi, which also means I, but it's a very different type of I. Why? Because it's not dependent on anything. That you believe in God is irrelevant. That you serve God or you don't serve God is irrelevant. What you do, what you don't do, irrelevant. God will exist regardless of your acknowledgement of him, or of your ignoring him, or dismissing him, or disproving of him. It is that God, a God independent from us, that has given the rules and regulations by which we have to live our lives. So fine, you'll say, God created the world, fine. After that, he left the building. We're on our own, he doesn't care anymore. So how do we know that he cares? Why should I do these 10 Commandments? Keep the Sabbath, honor my parents, all these things. God doesn't care. He made the world. He's busy with other things. Why? And how do we know? Because it says, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So what does that prove? Because the rabbis say, if God is already introducing himself, give your biggest title. You know, like when you put your resume, you put right away in the top how great you are. Why didn't God say, I'm the Lord your God who created the world? No. God wanted us to know one thing, that he still cares and he's involved in the destiny and future of mankind. I'm the God who took you out of the land of Egypt. That's not a God who doesn't care. That's a that's a God who came in and turned over a nation, destroyed Egypt, liberated his people, opened the sea, brought all types of plagues to the Egyptian people. That's a God who cares. That's a precise God. That's a God who's involved in our destinies. How precise is God in destiny? There was always a land dispute between ancient Ethiopia and Egypt. One said a certain part of the land belonged to them, and the other claimed the same thing. And then came the plague of the frogs. And it was only then that the land dispute was resolved, because the frogs were only and exactly within the borders of Egypt. God is very deliberate, very precise, very accurate. He plays a part in every detail of history, and certainly within our own personal lives. That's the God that's giving us the 10 Commandments. When Einstein made a certain sentence, everybody was impressed because it came from Einstein. He said there's 2 ways to live your life. One is that nothing is a miracle, but the other way is that everything is a miracle. And that's the way a Jew has to live their life. Either everything is from God or nothing's from God. Because everything is interrelated. A leaf fell off a tree. Okay, what does God care about the leaf? But then somebody walks by and they slip on that leaf. And then they break their hip, and then they have to go into a hospital, and their child has to come from another country and take care of them. And then an extra nurse has to get a job. And it's an endless reaction. A chain reaction from what? From one leaf. So either God is involved in everything, or he's involved in nothing. The Talmud teaches us that there's not a blade of grass that doesn't have an angel over it that says, grow, grow. So yes, God does care about what we do. And thus this first commandment is the introduction and the necessity and the fundamental point to even get through the rest of the commandments. There is nothing but God. So you could say, yes, I believe in God. What's the issue? Why are you making a big deal about this? Okay, so you believe in God. But how do you believe in God? Do you believe it's a God that owes you something? Because you're rich, because you're good looking, because you have muscles, because you're an awesome person, because you gave charity to 2 homeless people. You're fantastic, awesome. God owes you? That's not a God that you're supposed to believe in. You owe God. You have to be the servant of God. He doesn't have to be your servant. God doesn't work for us. In fact, the highest title a person can have is to be a servant of God. King David was called a servant of God. Moses was called a servant of God. You see, what's great about a servant, perhaps just let's say you're a servant to a king. The servant doesn't have to make an appointment. He's a key to every door. He has access to the king at all times. Even a dignitary who wants to see the king has to make an appointment. He has a certain amount of time. It's over at a certain point. He's a limited engagement with the king. But a servant, when we're servants to God, he opens the whole palace for us. He opens every door. But it's not easy to be a servant of God, because people think, oh, a servant is kind of the easiest job. You know, you get on your hands and knees and you clean a floor, you're a servant. No, a servant means you have to get your own ego out of the way. You have to clean away everything inside of you that's dirt, that's stunk. Your ego, your fear, your lusts, your desires. Then you could be a servant of God. Because 2 things can't fill the same place at the same time. So it's either you or it's either God. What's inside of you? Who's animating your spirit? Do you only believe in God when things are going good? So often you hear people say, oh, thank God, this, it's great, it's going good, it's going wonderful. It's easy to thank God when things are going good. How about when things are going terrible, awful? Are you able to bless God when things are going terrible in your life? So we think of Job. His friends told him to, and his wife told him to curse God when Job was going through, it's terrible what happened to Job. Incredible story. So Job refused to curse God. And he said, God is given and God is taken. Blessed be the name of God. How hard is it to bless God even when things are going terrible for you? Do you even believe in God when things are going terrible for you? So it's not so easy to say we believe in God. Is our belief in God conditional? When 1 + 1 = 2, we believe in God. But all of a sudden 1 + 2 and 7 equals a Holocaust. And oh my God, do I believe in God anymore? Do you believe in God and hedge your bets at the same time? Okay, I believe in God, but I'm still going to work on Sabbath, because if you believed in God, you would not work on the Sabbath. It's very interesting when I started to become religious, and the challenges were not easy. I wasn't brought up in a religious home. Everything was against my, almost everything was against my being able to be successful in it. And I remember when I was in school and there was a huge exam and I couldn't go to certain classes that were being given on Shabbat or on the holidays at the time, and it was, I think, a calculus class. And anybody who read my book knows how bad I am at math. I'm still counting on my fingers. But I ended up getting the highest mark in the whole grade, which to me is a miracle. This is a miracle that has to be added to the Bible. Anybody who knows me and my math skills, in calculus yet, if you would show me now a calculus book, I wouldn't even know which end to open. And other instances when I was working in the news industry, how do you not work on a holiday or Shabbat when there's an airplane crash, a terrorist thing? You're in the news. 9/11, I was, working at ABC News during 9/11. How do you not go to work then? Because God came first. I always stood my ground, and I was always blessed, and I was never lacking, and I always had something to eat, and all of us always have something to eat. And there's a lot we throw away and a lot we don't appreciate. So none of us are ever going hungry. So maybe we should just have a little bit more faith in God. And that's what the First Commandment is all about. And then another thing is if you really do believe in God, and we learn now that he's a God who came down to Egypt to rescue us, so he's involved in our destiny. If you really believed in God, you would behave. You would do what he wants you to do. You would know that he's a God not just of, giving blessings, which is great, yes, but he's also a God of justice and of punishment. And if you think otherwise, then you don't believe in God. You believe in a Disneyland episode where everything has a happy ending, but you don't believe in God, because God is a punishing God. He will reward you and he'll punish you. Now, Maimonides lists the 13 principles of faith. And the 11th principle of faith is that one who keeps the Torah will be rewarded, and the one who doesn't will be punished. So that is also an element of faith. We're still in the First Commandment, and how technical and problematic is all this is. At first you thought you believed in God. Now you're not so sure what you believe in. If you believe in God, you know that you have only one audience in your life. Because if you have many audiences, you have your boss and your wife and your this and your that and your neighbor, and then you're going to be 19 million different people to please everyone and put on the show for each person, and end up doing things wrong because you end up being a hypocrite. You kind of lose your values along the way because you have to please this one in that way and this one in another way, and before you know it, you don't even know who and what you are. All you are is a servant to everybody, but not to God. But if you know that God is the only one who's watching you, he's the only audience. You're in Carnegie Hall or in a Broadway theater, and the only audience you have is God. When you realize which eyes are upon you, you behave, you do the right things. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. That's only the First Commandment. Wait till you hear what I have to say about stealing. Shabbat Shalom.